right. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it. And we're going to be talking about setting and achieving goals today. So that's our goal. Figure out our goals.
We achieved it.
Yes, we are in the process of achieving. So we set it and we're achieving. So a little bit about my background. I did a lot of professional development on how to set and achieve goals, both from an academic perspective, but also more broadly, kind of just how to figure out our goals, how to think about our goals, how to figure out our goals, how to think about our goals, and how to have a comprehensive approach to goal setting that will help make sure that we achieve our goals, not only professionally, but in our lives. What are our life goals? And that's why I wanted to start the presentation off with today. Now, giving you a little bit of context for what the presentation will look like first. There will be three parts, and they're described in the handout. And the kind of activities we'll do in each part are described as well. They're described on the Setting and Achieving Goals handout. The first part will be, as you see, on ultimate goals and values. Then developing SMART goals from your vision of your ideal life. And finally, implementing SMART goals in your everyday life. So those are going to be the 3 points. And there's a list of digital resources available, and I described where it is in the handout. So let's talk a little bit about developing a vision of your ideal life. And I'd like you to think about what you want your life to be. What kind of adjectives would you use to describe your life? Well, let me pause there. I want to mention that there will be a number of exercises throughout each of these 3 parts. And at the end of each of these 3 parts, there will be a discussion. So try to hold your questions, unless they're very specific questions, to the discussion section at the end of each part. Okay? So the first thing I want to talk about is just a vision of an ideal life. What do we want our life to be? What do we want our ultimate goal to be? Many people, when they think about what kind of a life they want, they think about adjectives. They generally come up with happiness. So I want a happy life. Now, that is a powerful term, happiness. It conveys contentment, joy, pleasure. But there are some challenges with wanting just a happy life. And there's been quite a bit of research that shows that people who are oriented toward having a life that is happy, who have that attitude of I just want to be happy, have some problems with actually being happy. And that happens for several reasons. And there was actually a great presentation by Rita as part of Gleb Rationality, which talked about some of these challenges with our idea of happiness, both how to build happiness, but also some challenges with it. So if we're just oriented toward happiness, and we're looking to get a lot of pleasure out of life, our minds create negative expectations. They create expectations of happiness. And so there's this greater desire for happiness creates high expectations for happiness. And so our expectations are often not fulfilled. And so just orienting toward happiness creates too high expectations. And so we're actually less happy if we're just oriented exclusively toward happiness. Now, and there's an interesting quote from Post-Secret about happiness, and if everyone knows what Post-Secret is, it's this website where you basically, people share their secrets about life. And I don't know if you can see it over here, this quote. No. Can you see it? No. All right. It says, I crossed 17 things off my bucket list in 2013, and not a single one of them made me happy. So, doing things that you think might be happy, might make you happy, might not necessarily make you happy. And so it's a very complex thing, how to become happy. Now, research on happiness also show that people who are oriented toward happiness, personal happiness, often ignore or even undermine the happiness of others. So that's another kind of challenge with going toward happiness as our orientation toward what our ultimate goal should be. And so there are some other verbs or some other adjectives which might be helpful when describing our ultimate goal. And this is coming from research in positive psychology. So words such as fulfillment, which is fulfillment, fulfilled life, satisfaction as a result of fully developing one's abilities and character, enacting and living one's values regarding both oneself and those around you. So that's kind of fulfillment. Then meaningfulness, meaningful life. A sense of finding a purpose, a meaning in life, generally connection to a broader world, broader things outside of oneself, to other people. And for many, this term resonates with being fulfilled, so meaningfulness. There's a term called flourishing, and that's to live within an optimal range of human functioning, one that connotes goodness, generativity, growth, and resilience, having the best life possible in all areas. So these are some other terms that can be functional as you think about your ideal life. And now, or other adjectives that have specific relevance to you. So other things that speak to you. So now I want you to take about a minute and write down what you think your ultimate goal can be, what your ideal life can be, what kind of adjectives you would use to describe your ideal. So there's space there, write it down, take about a minute. Your ideal life. All right. So let's consider the next part of section 1, your life areas. Now, what life areas are important for your ideal life? What life areas are the ones that make up your ideal life? We have life areas such as professional, family, friends, social life, romance, leisure, learning, health. What are those life areas where it's important for you to have the adjectives that you just wrote down be enacted? So whatever you wrote, whether you wrote happiness, fulfillment, meaningfulness, flourishing, whatever you wrote down, what are those key life areas for you where you want to be fulfilled, have meaning, be flourish, be happy? Think about those life areas. Think about weighing them. And think what components they currently constitute of your life. And so take about 30 seconds or so to write down those life areas. All right. And then I want to move on to the next section, which I like to call living your values, so being the person you want to be. And different phrasing actually works better for different people. I want you to consider, to ponder, what would it be like, what would it mean for you to live your values in each of these life areas? In each of the life areas that you just wrote out, what would it be like? What would it mean for you to live your values? By the way, we're talking about HCCO groups. There's another HCCO group called the Values and Meanings and Discussion Potluck. Meets at once a month on the third Saturday. at Agnes my house, our house. So that's one good place to talk about your values and meanings from a secular perspective. Now, so that's the values perspective, and that speaks more to some people. Another way to look at it is, what would it mean for you to be the person you want to be in each of these life areas? What would it mean for you individually to be the person that you want to be for each of the life areas that you wrote out about? Now, you might have heard of the phrase, fake it till you make it, and it is really directly relevant here. If you start a deliberate practice of thinking, what person do I want to be in each of these life areas? Or what would it mean for me to live my values in each of these life areas? You will naturally find yourself heading toward achieving your goals in each of these life areas, toward being the person you want to be, toward living the values that you want to live in each of these life areas. It might also help to think about being, not doing. Think about who you want to be as opposed to what you want to do. And now, I want you to take a couple of minutes, so it's going to be a little bit of a longer exercise, and to envision yourself being you want to be in each of these life areas that you wrote out, or living your values in each of these life areas that you wrote out earlier. Write out what it would mean and how you would think and act differently if you were actually the person you wanted to be in that life area, if you actually lived your values fully in that life area. Take a couple of minutes to do that. I anticipate this will take a little bit. So again, think about how you would act and think differently, and how this would help you accomplish your goals. Any more seconds, then we'll go on. All right, before we go on, I wanted to point out that there is nothing stopping you right now from starting to think and act differently as a way of faking it till you make it, and starting to accomplish those goals. All right, so this is the end of section 1. Now, I want to ask you to share any thoughts you had about your goals or your approach to thinking about your goals that was developed more by this section, by the material you learned here, by the exercises that you did. So please, share any thoughts that you would, any realizations, insights.
Well, somebody's got to break the ice. So here goes.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm a big fan of Maslow and the hierarchy and all that jazz, and the pyramid and all that. So one of my terms was to become self-actualized. Try to reach the goals of progressing through those steps, so to speak. To just be the, I don't know how to put it, just to reach that level of contentment that all the necessities have been taken care of, and then I increase the fold until I get to that point. So that's one of the goals, I guess, was to be in that. And I use contentment and mindfulness as other ways of being in life, and mindfulness can lead to content. If mindfulness leads to contempt, you're not doing it right. But anyway, so there you go.
Okay. Would anybody else like to share?
You're talking about the first one?
Yes.
For me, I think work is what's important for me to keep my mind occupied, if nothing else. But also, just like the idea of being self-supported and supporting myself and useful in life and accomplishing things, whether it's building a house or delivering Christmas trees.
Okay. Anyone else wants to share? All right. Well, if not, let's go on to section 2. So, in section 2, we'll talk about developing SMART goals for your vision of your ideal. So the key here is to work backward from your vision of your ideal life, which you kind of developed right now in part 1, and figure out the best paths to help lead you there, to help lead to your vision of your ideal life. Doing that will help you figure out what's working well right now and what can be improved as you try to achieve your goals in a better fashion. So there will be several exercises followed by discussion. And the first thing I want to do is a goal tree exercise. So if you envision sort of a tree-like structure, and here would be your ideal life. Kind of, this is the very top of this goal tree. What kind of life is your ideal life? The one that you just wrote out in the first section. Now, the next level of branches leading down should lead to your life areas. So this is ideal life, and this is your life areas. I don't know what you wrote down. Health, let's say. This is friends and family. Let's say this is work. Let's say this is romance. However, you have leisure, whatever things you have written out yourself. So goal tree. Now, the next branches leading out of each of these areas would refer to specific long-term projects that you want to either achieve or maintain for each of these areas. specific work projects, specific things that you want to do for your health, fitness, friends and family, you want to be keeping in touch with them, specific projects that you want to be doing. Would be the next level down. And then from each of these broad but specific projects, you would have even smaller, more specific projects that would lead to each of these more specific projects. And then, of course, you can have these go down further. So this is a goal tree technique, and it helps you recognize what are the kinds of activities you want to be doing that will all lead in the end to your ideal life. Now, these things up here are your high order goals. These are things that are really, really important for you. Really, really important for reaching that ideal life, which we all seek. Now, it's highly beneficial to have a very flexible approach to the way that you reach your ideal life. This will help make sure that you minimize the possibility of getting stuck on your way to reaching your life goals. Since if something is not working, you can take a different path. Now, these are really, really important. These are also important, but less so. And these are even less important. We have to recognize the benefit of seeing that we can have this project be replaced by another project that would still lead here. And we can have this project, even this big project, replaced by another project as long as it all leads here. So if you want to have a great health, you can exercise once a day, or you can take a walk. So exercise, go to the gym, you can take a walk, you can be doing a lot of things to lead to your health. You can be having regular checkups, you could be having a healthy diet, you can be doing a combination of things. But your goal is not to have, your goal is not to walk once a day. Your goal is not to go to the gym once a day. Your goal is to have health. And this is a concept called fungible goals, or fungibility, where basically you figure out fungibility refers to something being easily replaced by something else. So the key here is to figure out what you actually want to accomplish, what your higher order goals are. And so to orient always toward doing the things that help you achieve your higher order goals, and not being stuck on doing these projects. Figuring out also what goals can be combined with each other. So for example, you can go to the gym and exercise, and that's one great thing that would lead to your health. Or you can go and take a walk with a friend, and that would lead both to your health and to friendships. So that would be another way of actually achieving the same sort of goals and combining them. So using your limited time, resources, and energy in more effective ways as you figure out the best path to achieving those goals. Jeff, did you have a question?
Okay, fine. Yeah, I have a little trouble with this sometimes when it's hard to say if I'm doing this in order for that or that in order for this. So for instance, some people are into running. Do I want to run so I can be healthy, or do I want to be healthy so I can run?
Okay.
You know, and I ask myself, and sometimes with things like that, I'm not sure if it's more one for the other. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Now, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. You are the only one. Each of us is an expert in our own lives. That's the one thing where the main people that we are the experts in. We are the experts in our own lives. How would you answer that question for yourself? Is it more important for you to be healthy, or is it more important for you to think of yourself as a runner?
Well, everyone wants to be healthy, but you know, I find myself happy when I have specific accomplishments. You know, and
Right.
the accomplishment is not so much, you can't really measure like living to 75 and feeling, well, still being alive at 75 and feeling great. You can measure like, hey, I ran a pretty good 5K.
Right, and that all goes into the kinds of things that lead to your health. And so you can be happy about satisfying the health area through specific accomplishments. But also, consider the possibility of being open to other ways of achieving those things. You can be a great runner and achieve health. You can also be a great person who goes to the gym 5 times a day, 5 times a week, and still achieve health. And those are also, that's another accomplishment. Or you can be, or if you want to, you can combine things, and let's say you can go to Krav, and you can both learn self-defense and go to the gym, and get that health. So you can get additional benefits through doing other things. Or you can get a running buddy and run with a running buddy, and then you get some socializing accomplished as well. So this actually leads me to another concept that I want to bring up called goal factoring. Let me write that down because I think it's here. And it's part of the exercise with the goal tree. And the concept can help you determine the best strategies for achieving goals, such as physical fitness that Jeff brought up. So this involves mapping out your motivations for doing things. For example, health, because we talked about, stress relief, weight loss, whatever your motivations are, behind doing some topic, and thinking about some activity, and thinking about more effective ways to achieve the same thing. So we talked about being healthy. So running can be a good way of achieving it. Other ways can be also good ways of achieving it. And other ways, as we talked about, can synergize different goals together. So you can accomplish a number of goals at the same time. So since our lives are, we as secular people know our lives are limited and we won't have another chance. We have a limited amount of time, energy, resources, effort, and attention. So it's beneficial for us to think about the best and most effective ways of using these resources in order to accomplish the highest order goals in our lives. All right. What I want you to do right now is are there any other questions on the goal tree, because it seems to be significant?
Can you explain a little more about goal factoring?
Sure. So looking at the motivations, looking at your motivations.
Give an example.
Hmm?
Give an example.
Sure. So we're just talking about health. What are your motivations in accomplishing any task? Running. You can look at running as accomplishing health. You can look at running as accomplishing the goal of being a runner, that way of thinking about oneself. You can think about running as a way of accomplishing, if you're running with a goal buddy, then if you're running with a running buddy, then you're accomplishing the goal of socializing, kind of chatting to that person. So whatever your motivations are for accomplishing any project, that's one element of it. And then thinking about whether there's a more effective way of accomplishing the same things or accomplishing additional things, and a way that takes less time, resources, energy, effort, attention. So that's the goal. That's what goal factoring is about, and it relates to the higher order goals. So what are the most effective ways of reaching those higher order goals for your life?
So what would be the example with running?
Mm-hmm. So
I have
question.
several motivations, and then you say like looking at different ways to accomplish those goals. So like what would be an example?
Okay. So thinking about running, let's say for you or for somebody, for person A, the goal of running is health. And that's the only motivation behind it. Then you can explore whether there are other ways of getting health, which is a higher order goal, besides running. or that would give you an additional benefit. So we talked about, let's say, going to Krav, and you get both health and self-defense. So let's say that's another area, wanting to feel protected. So if you spend the same amount of time, effort, and energy on running or in going to Krav class, Krav Maga, then it would be more effective to take the Krav Maga class because you get additional benefits. Something like that. Or if you get, if instead of running, you can go to the gym and you can, running outside, you can go to the gym and you can walk on a treadmill and watch the evening news. And let's say it's important to watch the evening news. So you get both that and the evening news. So that's a more effective way of doing things, taking less time, effort, resource, and attention. Does that kind of respond to the question?
Thank you.
Sure. Other questions about goal tree and goal factoring? I'll have you draw out your own goal tree in a sec, so just, I have questions about goal tree, goal factoring before I do that. Yes, sir.
Almost implying that you, where it's possible, you set actual quantifiable limits on how long it should take you to get to a certain goal, or how, how much of a certain goal you should accomplish this week versus next week, and so
We'll
forth.
talk about specific ways of achieving goals in the next section, so in part 3. But kind of what I want you to do the exercise and is just draw out a very basic outline of your goal tree. Just at this top level. I mean, you should have the materials already from section 1. For the very top, for these areas of life, an approximate one more level of the kinds of projects that you envision as leading to you achieving your ideal life in each of the areas of life that are most important. Okay. So please take a couple of minutes to draw out your own individual goal tree. And again, there's space on the back of the sheet or anywhere to draw out your individual goal tree.
Getting started good. Oh, I thought that was the dinner. Oh, I'm sorry.
34 seconds for the goal tree. Try to draw out as many, at least down to the third level, but if you can draw out more, please draw out more. Of course, you'll finish doing these at home. All right. Well, I see plenty of people are still writing, but you can finish your goal tree at home. Let's talk about another technique. And this is a technique that links up well to the goal tree technique. So it's called a SBOT analysis, S-B-O-T. Now you might have heard of a SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I like SBOT analysis a little bit better. It's similar analysis, strengths, instead of weaknesses, there's the term baggage, then opportunities and threats. Now, we won't have time to go through the whole SBOT analysis here. But basically what you do as part of the SBOT analysis is write out what your strengths are, what your baggage is, and what your opportunities that you see in your own environment are, and what the threats are. What I want to do is focus on the baggage here and have you do the rest of the stuff at home by yourselves. So what's baggage? It's the consequences of problematic events and decisions in our lives. So consequences. Problematic events in our lives, developments in our lives, and the consequences of problematic decisions that we have made as well in our lives. That's one element of it. And also, so consequences, and also negative patterns of thinking and feeling. So the consequences of problematic events in our lives, the consequences of problematic decisions in our lives, and also negative patterns of thinking and feeling in our lives. So what I would like you to do right now is take about a minute to write down their baggage. Write down your baggage relating to any of the areas of life that we talked about, any of the areas of life that are primary for you. What is the kind of baggage that is present in your life? What weighs you down? And for some ideas on cognitive and emotional baggage, you can look at the list of biases present on the introduction handout, if that would be helpful. Gesundheit. One of the primary goals of this meetup, actually, rationality, is to help you be aware of and deal with those biases, with those negative patterns of thought and feeling. So you can look at those. Generally, write down the baggage for each of your life areas. So, a minute. 15 more seconds, and we'll go on. All right. So there are several ways of dealing with our baggage. Now, you can repair your baggage. You can let your baggage go. Or finally, you can adapt to the weight of the baggage. So what I want you to do right now is to take a look at the baggage you just wrote down and take about a minute and a half to write out what you plan to do about each of those elements of baggage. Yes?
Would you be able to provide maybe like more examples of like the types of baggage and how this might apply? It's like maybe I'm not really used to thinking of baggage. Hard enough to think about it, but just like what might apply to the different types of like consequences and patterns that you might have.
Okay. Good question. Is anybody willing to share any baggage that they wrote out? Yes, Jake.
Yeah, work.
Okay, work. Good. So, work is a baggage in what sense?
I don't like it.
Okay, great. Perfect. So, thank you. Yes, perfect. So there are several ways of we talked about 3 ways of dealing with this with baggage: repair the baggage, fix the situation at work, let it go, let the work situation go, or adapt to the weight. So deal with the consequences, the strains of the weight. What kind of things would you like to do with your work?
I would think I would prefer option B.
Okay, let it go. Okay, so there you go. That's perfect. So that's exactly how you would write that out and figure out what ways to do it.
So I turn in my 2 weeks tomorrow then?
Huh? However it works for you. Letting it go does not mean that you have to do it right now. But basically, it refers to figuring out how you would deal with each of these pieces of baggage, and the exact techniques would take a longer time. But basically, figuring out how you would deal with it. And thank you for suggesting that example. Is that example kind of clear? Anything should we talk a little bit more about baggage? Anyone has any other questions, comments? Yes, Jake.
So finding a way that you enjoy your work would be repairing your work?
Right. Changing your work, yes.
And changing jobs would be adapting, kind of?
Well, adapting would be not doing anything. Just saying, okay, this is a shitty workplace, and I will focus on other things in my life. So adapting to the situation as is. Repairing would be changing it. Letting it go would be drawing away from the situation, leaving the situation.
So getting a new job would be like letting it go. Or repair.
Possibly.
That'd be repairing,
It
wouldn't it?
may not.
Letting it go would be any area that you let go of a specific situation. What you do after that is a different element.
Oh.
Yes.
You mentioned something as part of baggage that I think most people, I know I hadn't tended to think about this as something that would be in that category necessarily, but the negative patterns of thinking. For example, with health, right? What we tell ourselves, like I'm too tired or I don't have
Yeah.
enough time, and really focusing on strategies to address the particular thoughts that we have. So if I don't have enough time, evaluating whether that's actually true or not. If not, letting that thought go. If it is, adapting with different ways, right? Maybe do a different activity that doesn't take as much time. If it's a matter of exercise.
Absolutely, and that's very insightful. And that's a different type of baggage, but it is a baggage just the same. And it is very important to understand that that is also baggage that we have, and we can choose to adapt to it if we are okay with that area of our lives, or if we don't want to currently deal with it, or we can choose to repair it, to work on that area of our lives, letting it go might be not quite the best metaphor in this case.
I was thinking letting go of the thought, right?
Yes,
The
letting go.
baggage is a negative thinking pattern.
Yes.
Letting go of it by.
Mhm. I think that's more of the repairing, changing the thinking pattern, and letting it go is a specific strategy of how you would repair it. But whatever metaphor works best for you in this case, absolutely. For each of us in this case, the primary goal of this element of analyzing the baggage is to recognize it, bring it into our consciousness, make us aware that this is a negative element in our lives, and figuring out how we plan to deal with it, or how we plan to even acknowledge it. If it's there, we want to know it's there. We want to believe in the truth. If it's true, we're already dealing with it. We're already dealing with it, and it doesn't hurt us to actually recognize it. And then as we recognize it, we can actually start to figure out ways that we can consciously deal with it, either by adapting to it, repairing it, or letting it go. Yes, Agnes.
It just sounds like a very kind of a challenging and empowering kind of thing, because it makes us like have a choice about, like Jake said, like, oh, I don't like my job. Well, you can leave your job. Whereas many of us don't think like it's really an option, but this kind of highlights that we should feel like we have options. Like even, maybe a baggage like a traumatic event in the past, or maybe like a difficult family member, or my car was stolen. Like it's a consequence of something that happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's kind of a challenge to everyone to think this way, and to kind of be faced with the fact that like we always have a choice, no matter like the baggage or difficult situation or something that happened.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that connects very well to what Rita was saying as well. Difficult family member, we don't necessarily think of, there is a thought pattern that family is family, and you always need to figure out how to deal with family, but that's not necessarily, there can be a more expansive range of ways of dealing with family than we consciously and immediately realize in our heads. And if we kind of just position that as a challenge that we can deal with, as some baggage, repair it, let it go, or adapt to it. And our thinking patterns and patterns of feeling are also, the negativity at least in them, is our baggage, and that we can also figure out how to deal with them if we consciously recognize it as baggage. Thank you. All right. So at this point, I do want you to take about a minute and a half and think about what you plan to do about each of those pieces of baggage that you wrote down earlier. So repair it, let it go, and adapt, or adapt to it. And as you do that, connect it to your goal tree. Make that part of your goal tree. So think about where you would position it on your goal tree. 15 more seconds, so finish up. All right. Let's talk about SMART goals. So, SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely goals. So this is another form of analysis, of goal analysis, that will help you connect your longer-term vision to more specific plans. And these are goals that are in the range of within 6 months, 3 to 6 months. I like to use 3 months, but different people have different preferences. So SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely goals. Now, as you think about developing your SMART goals, I want you to think about developing more big, long-term, 3 months SMART goals. Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely goals. And then really more specific 2-week goals that are going to be, again, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. Gesundheit. Now, the 2-week goals, the 3-month goals should have an approximate timeline of the kinds of things you want to accomplish within 3 months. The 2-week goals, 2-week goal from now, should have much more concrete timelines and the various tasks that you want to accomplish and the various kinds of resources necessary to accomplish those tasks. So that should be in the 2-week range. The 2-week range as you think about SMART goals. Yes, Chief?
Can you repeat that again?
Sure.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks. And that should have specific timeline, very concrete timeline. Very concrete tasks and very concrete resources that you would need to accomplish these tasks. Whereas 3 months, it should have not as concrete, more vague timeline and tasks. Depending on your goals, you can estimate the resources or not. I don't know what your goals would be. But this should be much more specific, more developed, more concrete. So, several things to think about as you consider your SMART goals. There is a useful technique called pre-hindsight, which I suggest you apply as you develop your SMART goals. Let me write that down. And basically, you figure out why you failed before you failed. That's what pre-hindsight is all about. So, imagine that 3 months passed and you actually didn't accomplish your 3-month SMART goal. How surprised are you? The less surprised you are, the more likely it is that you will actually fail at your 3-month SMART goal. So what you want to examine as you figure out your 3-month SMART goal is what reasons are there for you having failed at that SMART goal. Examine each of those reasons. Examine your level of surprise for failing for each of those reasons. and figure out strategies that you will deal with those reasons for why you failed. So look ahead and then look behind. So let's say, going with the example of fitness, let's say you decided to go to Krav Maga class every day or every week, 3 times a day. And then you look ahead and you figure out that 3 months from now you stop going to class, you failed. Examine why you failed. Is it because you had too many other commitments? Is it because it was such a nice day outside you didn't want to go to the gym? What were the reasons that caused you to fail? What were the various motivations? Same thing for running. Same thing for quitting a job is a little bit easier in that regard. But let's say you have Rita brought up some negative thought patterns about something. So let's say you find in 3 months you still have that negative thought pattern. What are the reasons you still have it? So was it too painful to deal with? Did you not come up with a effective plan of dealing with that thought pattern? So, and as we all recognize, our minds are pretty pliable, but we have to put energy and effort to actually change our minds and our ways of thinking. So did you not anticipate how much energy and effort it would take and not put in the required time to do so? So things like this. Figure out why you might have failed and then work backward from that. Yes.
To make an observation and to tie what you were saying into the Maslow's hierarchy of needs comment that you made, it seems like, especially for the negative thought patterns, a lot of those might relate to having a lack of resources on that very basic level of like having enough sleep to tackle those thought patterns, or not eating well to have the energy to do it. I think that might apply to a lot of them.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely an important point. So figuring out what are the elements that actually undermine your ability to achieve that goal, and then addressing those elements. Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, Tom.
I've heard discussed a concept that's pretty similar to the pre-hindsight concept, but I think it has a really catchy, fun name. It's a combination of an understanding of Murphy's Law, everything that can go wrong will go wrong, and the notion of jiu-jitsu, and it's called Murphy-jitsu, which is to intentionally go through a pre-hindsight kind of process, imagining all potential failure states, and learning how to flow with that in a jiu-jitsu-y kind of way, and just kind of roll with situations that might come up, or at least be somewhat prepared for the turbulence of any of these goal processes. But
yeah, it sounds like a very similar concept. Yeah, so whatever metaphor or word works best for you. Thank you for bringing that up. So another thing I want to mention about SMART goals. As you think about developing your SMART goals, consider the difference between process goals and outcome goals. Process goals relate to choosing to engage in certain processes or activities, while outcome goals relate to having some sort of achievement. Now, process goals are often easier to accomplish and plan for because they're more under your control. So, while outcome goals more often depend on outside elements. So, for example, an outcome goal in health and fitness might be to lose 30 pounds, and the process goal might be to go running every day. Now, whether you lose 30 pounds might be less up to you. Whether you go running every day is more up to you. So you have more control over that element of yourself. So that's something to think about as you figure out your SMART goals, your process goals versus your outcome goals. I have a personal tendency to prefer process goals because they're more under my control, so I feel that I am more able to accomplish them, and I can feel myself accomplishing them as I engage in them. While an outcome goal is really a long-term way, often to the future, so it presents less of personal motivation and it is less under my control. But it depends on what goal that you're writing out and figuring out for yourself. But just keep in mind this difference between process goals and outcome goals. All right. Are there any questions on SMART goals before I have you do an exercise in SMART goals? Yes, Jude.
What's the difference between a goal that is relevant versus timely?
So relevant refers to one that is relevant for your life. And timely means, refers to one that is time bounded. Thank you for asking. All right, at this point, I'd like you to take 2 minutes to write out your SMART goals for the next 3 months and for the next 2 weeks. So just write them out, and you'll do the more extensive one at home, writing them out more fully. But in the meantime, 2 minutes for your SMART goals for 2 weeks from now and for 3 months from now. Thirty more seconds. All right. So it seemed that I was planning to hold the discussion until now, but it seemed that people wanted to discuss earlier. So I think we just not have a discussion at the end of the second section and go on to the third section, unless somebody had specific questions about something in the third section, in the second section. Anyone have any specific questions? If not, then we'll go on to the third section. All right. So, the third section is how to implement your SMART goals. So, the first thing I want to talk about is the broad area of planning, time management, and organization. And of course, this is a vital area for you to actually accomplish things, be productive, accomplish as much and be as productive as you can be. And so, several things I want to mention here for this section. One is to-do list. It's an invaluable tool for connecting your SMART goals, your 2-week SMART goals and your 3-month SMART goals to your everyday life. And so what I'd like you to think about is using your SMART goals for the next 2 weeks, writing out a concrete list of to-do things, to-do tasks for the next. I won't have you write out these things, but this is what it will benefit you to do. So write out your list of to-dos for the next 3 days. Very specific, very concrete to-dos for the next 3 days. Each day, either in the morning or in the evening, take 15 minutes to revise your to-do list. You should cross off things that you did that day and add things that you plan to accomplish in the next 3 days, so that you always have a rolling to-do list for the next 3 days, which you always revise once a day at a 15-minute session meeting with yourself. That way you have a constant guide to your to-do list, to your next 3 days, to what you plan to do, and you can revise it as things come up during that day that you need to take care of, and as you want to cross off some of these things. So, to-do list. Then, calendar. Make sure you set your scheduling to-dos into your calendar. Make sure you use your calendar extensively. And finally, a reminder. A reminder system of some sort. Would create reminders for yourself of recurring tasks or one-off tasks that would help you make sure to actually accomplish those tasks. Now there are digital calendars, digital to-do lists, digital reminders. There's paper calendars, paper to-do lists, paper reminders, post-it notes. For myself, I use Google Calendar for my calendar, Google Drive document for my to-dos, and follow-up then email reminders, my main source of reminders. You would benefit from figuring out the things that work best for you. There's a list of digital resources that I posted online. It's described here in the handout. So you can take a look at that. There's going to be some resources there for reminders, for planning, for time management and organization. The key is not specifically what you use. The key is to develop a system. A system of to-dos, a calendar, and a reminder that works for you individually. So develop a cohesive system. Avoid abandoning the system when you feel bad about delays or procrastinations. That's really a slippery slope. Rather than abandoning the system, change the way you think about delays and procrastination. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But basically, systematic approach to this process, to time management, to planning and organization, will help ensure that you are the most effective you can be, and it will help ensure that you are able to accomplish those SMART goals that are a result of your planning for your ideal life. So this is a cohesive structure that goes from ideal life to SMART goals to time management, planning, and organization system, and will help ensure that you get here. Now, another thing I want to warn you about is to not overburden yourself with tasks, not take on too much. That's always a danger. There's a concept called planning fallacy, which is described as as on your handout, in your introduction handout. And it's basically a bias that our minds tend to fall into, where we assume everything will go perfectly and everything will go according to plan. And we don't build in enough resources to take care of contingencies, to take care of things when situation when things don't go according to plan. So it's called planning fallacy. And so this is basically a reminder to build in quite a bit more time than we originally think we need, more resources to our plan, to leave some gaps between activities, don't schedule things too closely together, and be more forgiving of ourselves when things don't go according to plan. Oh, another thing I want to mention is, as you're doing your planning system, thinking about your planning system, consider the benefits of a concept called structured procrastination. So, what is structured procrastination? Basically, you know that you have a number of areas of life that you want to have your ideal life in. So your ideal life has a number of life areas. And as you take on tasks meant to lead to your ideal life in each of these areas, sometimes you may not have the energy, the time to accomplish something that you actually plan to do at that time. Consider switching to doing tasks in another life area that will still lead to you having your ideal life. So as you procrastinate on one task, do something else that is still going to benefit you, that is still going to be functional for you. So be very deliberate about the ways that you choose to procrastinate in order to help you accomplish your life goals. So in order to keep on time, I won't do an exercise here, but I want to ask you for your thoughts and questions about time management, planning, and organization. So, questions, thoughts?
I have so I have experienced the planning fallacy many times. But sort of like whenever I'm planning something, I sort of always feel like, well, no matter how much leeway I give myself in like pushing this deadline back, like I will still like manage to like not put enough resources to get done by that like even pushed back deadline because well I'm like worried that I'm gonna like get lazy and like not work as hard as I would if I push it back. So like I feel like this internal pressure to keep deadlines closer because I think they will make me work harder. And I'm not sure if you have any advice. Well, I'm interested if you have any advice on like trying to figure out gaming that.
One beneficial way that I figured out for myself doing that is the difference between internal deadline and external deadline. So kind of a hard external deadline far away, softer internal deadline closer. So for me, that's something that works, and I know other people have different approaches. Another approach that I know some people try that I don't personally do, but as an intermediate step between that, is to have a soft internal deadline, then have a really hard external deadline, but then have an intermediate deadline where you are accountable to someone else for it. Not to yourself, but not to a really hard deadline. So that you would have to reveal or have somebody push you in order to accomplish a task. So kind of an intermediate deadline.
I will try that. Thank you.
Sure. Yes.
I was just thinking with that, what I like to do is break stuff down into smaller pieces. So you set that goal out far enough to where it's realistic, but if you remember all the little pieces, those are your everyday goals. So you can set your goal to where you need it to be further down the road, but if you know that there's like an everyday, these are the things I need to do, and when I stay on those, then I get to that one that I've let be longer down there because I'm keeping myself in check every day with those smaller goals.
Thank you, sir. Yes, Liz.
Just wanted to give a plug for a great tool for doing that very thing, for breaking down things into daily goals so that you can have an idea of whether you're on track, is BeeMinder. It's like bees, like the insect, BEE Minder. It's a website that lets you set a long-term goal and then tells you how much you need to do every day and sort of keeps you on they call it a yellow brick road, but if you go off track, it tells you that you've gone off track, and the first time you just reset it and it lets you start over, but the second time it takes $5 from you, and then the third time it takes $10 from you, and it goes up from there. And you know, pretty quickly you get to an amount of money that's motivating for you, and you decide that
Then you stop using beeminder.
or that, but you know, it's worth a try, right?
Thank you. And that's an example of contract tools. And one of the digital resources I have posted online is a whole wide list of various contract tools that you can choose to use. Some of them are like beeminder, where they take money from you. Some are others where you can choose to donate to various charities. Some don't use financial incentives and pressures. There are a variety of tools to fit your individual preferences. Yes?
I was just going to say the tool that Alyssa mentioned is also a great way to get a better sense of whether you're setting your initial deadlines well for yourself. If you're taking the time to identify all of the tasks that are going to make up achieving your goal, then you can look at each of those and say, do I really have the time to get that done in this day? And then as you set goals in the future, you have a better sense of how long things actually take you. If you're really using that feedback that you're getting of, hey, you're off track.
Oh, excellent point, and this connects very well to the pre-hindsight situation, where you kind of figure out earlier in advance why you failed, and you know, there were too many things to do. You know, you didn't consider all the elements of the project. But yes, absolutely, and that, I think that's definitely a good tool to use for that. Thank you, Alyssa and Rita. All right. So I want to get to another element of some reasons why that would help us achieve our goals and some reasons why we fail, relating to emotional management and habit formation. Now, often how we get ourselves to do various things, to accomplish various goals, is through negative reinforcement. Oh, I didn't do that, we're bad. I'm bad, I didn't achieve that, I deserve some punishment. Research on cognition, psychological research, actually shows that negative reinforcement rarely works well in getting us to do things, that we create negative emotions about goal setting, goal achievement, that actually harms us. So I want to encourage you to focus on positive reinforcement, on celebrating your accomplishments and achievements when you actually achieve your goals and do things on time, achieve those SMART goals. So positive reinforcement, positive emotional reinforcement works better. You can set yourself either emotional rewards, decide to feel happy about something, or do something, a happiness activity, go out, treat yourself to something, whatever you like to do. So have positive reinforcement as part of your goal accomplishing process. So as you said, set specific goals, positively reinforce yourself. Now, something else that is important is flexibility and openness. So be very flexible with your goal achievement. Again, many of us intuitively don't tend to acknowledge how much effort certain goals will take to achieve and fall into planning fallacy. I do this myself, it happens to everyone. And so it's important to be flexible and generous and forgiving of ourselves for failing to accomplish our goals. And having that attitude will actually generally tend to lead to better goal achievement, better long-term goal achievement, because we don't have that negative emotion surrounding those goals. Flexibility, another element of flexibility that's important is figuring out alternative ways of reaching goals. So that relates to the being higher order on the goal tree. Think about ways of accomplishing higher order things with projects besides the one you're currently engaged in. So higher order goals and flexibility. Patience. be patient in reaching your goals. Sometimes things come up in life that prevent you, that challenge you from reaching your goals. And it is counterproductive to experience strong levels of frustration, strong levels of anger, strong levels of upsetness with yourself for not accomplishing those goals. So, patience. Now, talk a little bit about procrastination. It's important for you to be patient and tolerant with yourself and with others for procrastination, for procrastinating activities, because just feeling negative about procrastination tends to, again, be counterproductive. For many people who engage in procrastination, feeling negative toward procrastination makes them actually procrastinate more, not less. So be patient about procrastination, be tolerant toward that. I'll mention a brief strategy that works well for people who tend to procrastinate, is to actually deliberately start doing a project. Often the problem with procrastination is this reluctance to actually start doing an activity. Whereas once you start doing an activity, often it just rolls along, and people who procrastinate on starting an activity actually get the activity done. So often the procrastination comes because the whole project seems very big, but actually starting the project, you already have that impetus done, and the whole project is not in front of you. So just get the next thing going, the next thing going, the next thing going, and you don't even notice how you accomplished the project. And the point that Sarah brought up earlier of breaking up the project into smaller chunks is actually effective for this as well. So just focus on doing the first small thing. It doesn't make it seem as big, as problematic, as scary. And another element of emotional management is forgiveness. So be forgiving of yourself and forgiving of others in terms of goal accomplishment. Again, this is both something that will help you feel better and something that will help you reach your own goals of being forgiving, because you don't have as much negativity around goals and goal setting and goal accomplishment. You are more open to being to actually accomplishing those goals. Likewise, forgiveness is helpful not only because we failed to accomplish those goals, but perhaps the problem was with how we set those goals. Perhaps we set our goals too highly, like Og was saying, not building enough energy and not building enough contingency for planning fallacy. So it might not be actually related to how well we're doing in accomplishing goals, but how problematically we have set those goals. So keep that in mind. Forgiveness. And so I wanted to talk about, in relation to emotional management, habit change. So an effective way of accomplishing our goals is to change our habits. Think about the habits that we have. The habits that we have with goal setting, for example. So figuring out a good system of planning, time management, and organization, using to-do lists, using calendars, and setting those goals, and having a habit of using that system, having a habit of using each element of that system, having a habit of organizing, so developing a habit of around each of these elements. Now, in developing these positive habits, it's important to be deliberate and conscious about what habits you develop, and there are also a wide variety of resources for how to develop effective habits. And I posted a list of these as part of the digital resources for this workshop. So choose which habits you want to develop and develop them deliberately and consciously. And in order to develop good habits, in order to manage your emotions and thought patterns, I would strongly recommend, or let me rephrase, something that has really worked for me, and I would strongly recommend that you consider checking out, is meditation, actually. So meditation has been really helpful for me in changing my thought patterns in a deliberate and conscious way, in managing my emotions, and in developing better and more effective habits. And as was mentioned earlier, Richard helps lead, so he leads a rational mindfulness group here at HCL, and that's one way, but it's an easy way to learn some meditation strategies. So that's something I want to mention. Okay. Thoughts about emotional management relating to goals, thoughts about habit change, thoughts about meditation, something you all want to share? Yes?
When you were talking about process versus outcome goals earlier,
Yes.
I was thinking about the habit change. And to change our habits, we do much better if we set process goals, like exercising more days than not, rather than exercising 5 times a week, or lose this number of pounds by such and such date. We can break it down into the steps and focus on that process. It helps, especially with goals that are harder to get started on, where there's been procrastination, a lot of emotional issues going on. And then also for the meditation, in addition to mindfulness, got used really well, and I just wanted to briefly share some of the things that I found in the literature about what is helpful with that. Getting to the point where you're really fully relaxed before going into the actual imagery portion tends to help it be more effective. Imagining the end result first has a longer lasting impact, but if there's an urgent need, going through a mental rehearsal of yourself going through all of the steps, or even getting started on the steps to get to your end result, is a kind of quick and dirty way to start getting an impact. Daily practice, engaging all 5 senses in the imagery, so not just the picture of what's going on, but imagining how it would feel, emotions you'd be going through, what sights and sounds there might be, and something that's dynamic, not a static picture, but kind of imagining going through the motions in real time, rather than imagining like looking at a photograph, say, a still picture of the end result, of having your goal.
Thank you. That's really thorough and excellent. I appreciate that. If you have any resource on that, would you be willing to post that in a comment to the digital resources that I posted?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So for me, for forming habits, especially habits like you mentioned that might be difficult to get started on, the thing that I found most helpful is the concept of a success spiral. The idea that the first task you ask yourself to do should be something that you almost certainly can accomplish, so that you can get the positive reinforcement of having accomplished that, and then gradually over time you challenge yourself more. So an example is when I started keeping a journal, I never thought of myself as someone who would do that, because I'm the kind of person who really hated to write and was really bad at routine, so I figured that was the exact opposite of what I would be good at. But on the other hand, it's been extremely useful for me. So what I did to get started with it was I just would open up a document and type some words in it every day. And as long as I was typing words in the document, then I had met my goal for that day. But that wasn't even how I kept track. How I kept track was every week I would figure out what my average words per day was. And as long as that number kept going up week by week, I figured I was winning. So at first the numbers were like really pathetic. Like it was 35 words per day on average. But as long as the next week it was 36, it was like I'm winning. I am successful. And that was how I was able to get myself into the habit of actually enjoying journaling, instead of thinking of it as like a painful obligation that I kept failing at. And so now I find it really easy to write about 300 words every day, and it's been super useful for me. So.
Nice. All right. Thank you for sharing, Alyssa and Rita, the success spiral and guided visualizations. Excellent. Okay. Let's go on to the next section of this. So I'll briefly go over through reassessing and optimizing goals and strategies. it's very useful to optimize and reassess your goals and strategies at regular intervals. So once every week, so you have a meeting every day with yourself for 15 minutes to figure out your to-dos. Once every week, sit down to revise your SMART goals and achievement strategies for the upcoming 2 weeks. So you have more specific, concrete timeline tasks for the 2 weeks and once up ahead. So sit down and revise those SMART goals and goal achievement strategies. Set aside half an hour to assess and evaluate how well you're accomplishing your SMART goals, perhaps in a journal of the type that Alyssa keeps, or whatever tool that would be beneficial for you. Consider what are the obstacles to you accomplishing your goals and what is the baggage hampering you from being as effective as you can be. And what goal achievement strategies can be optimized of the things that we're talking about. So think about reassessing those, updating them. Write out the very specific goals and timelines and resources and tasks necessary to accomplish your SMART goals for the next 2 weeks. And then celebrate your awesomeness by rewarding yourself in some way. So have this half hour or hour long meeting with yourself and then celebrate your accomplishments for the previous week. And once every month, have a longer session where you revisit your SMART goals, those more vague ones, for the next 3 months, and then reassess those. Reassess those, adopt the same sort of process. That way you'll always have rolling SMART goals that are going to be more vague for the next 3 months and more specific ones for the next 2 weeks. So specific strategies of optimizing them. Then a couple of things on social support and accountability I wanted to mention. It's very important to gain some sort of social support for your goal achievement strategies. Consider sharing your goals with people whom you trust to support you. At the same time, it's important to ask those people, to the ones you trust, to help hold you accountable to your goals. Some research has shown that if you just talk about your goals without having people hold you accountable, you may actually be less likely to accomplish your goals. You might actually have less motivation if you just talk about them without having people hold you accountable. So it's beneficial and helpful to have people hold you accountable to your goals. And here I'd like to introduce something called the Goal Buddy system. And we've decided as part of Columbus Rationality, of HSL Columbus Rationality, to create a system of goal buddies. Now, we've had this system running with some experienced members of the group, and it's basically two people who meet and help each other accomplish goals that they seek out. So that's the essence of the goal buddy system. Your goal buddy would help both provide strategies for helping you accomplish your goals, celebrate your goal accomplishment, and hold you accountable to helping achieve your goals, and vice versa. So I'd like to introduce Ben, and he will talk a little bit about the goal buddy system. I think he is going to be in charge of connecting people with it. So Ben, just a minute or two about the goal buddy system.
So you've actually already covered most of the highlights of it. So we have our fancy schmancy sign-up sheet here. Anyone who's interested will pass it around, and people can put their names and emails on there. And then I get to use a super scientific method and match people up. Ideally with some of the experienced members who Gleb mentioned have been doing this for a little while. And Gleb himself is actually one of the best goal buddies out there as far as helping people get stuff done. So we're going to match people up hopefully with experienced people, and then maybe some sideways connections as well. Then really it's just get then kind of you'll be informed who you're partnered with. Then just kind of get in touch, either schedule a time to go over this about once a week or whatever works out for you, in person if possible, or over whatever means of technology or phones or whatever that's technology is your personal preference. Really, it's whatever works for you and your partner. And then there might be some kind of general announcements of awesomeness in the future, but that's the bones of the program for now.
All right, can you please pass around the sheet?
Thanks.
All right. So another good way of getting community support is coming, of course, to the rationality meetup. So here is a place where we talk about effective ways of achieving goals, figuring out how to basically improve our thinking patterns, our ways of feeling, some instrumental ways of actually accomplishing our goals, and being in a community of people who are interested in supporting you and supporting your ability to accomplish your goals in the best possible ways. And not forgetting that rationality is part of HCCO, the humanist community of Central Ohio. And would you like to
Sure.
pitch for HCCO?
All right. So the Columbus Rationality Community is a part of the humanist community of Central Ohio. They pay rent so that we can use this space. So as you are willing and able, I just want to encourage everybody to throw whatever makes you proud and happy into the hat. And this money will go into the humanist community of Central Ohio. And we will use it to continue to have heat and lights and things like that. And thank you very, very much for coming. And I also want to encourage everybody to take a moment to thank Gleb for his awesome presentation.
Thank you. So now, the Humanist Community of Central Ohio is another venue that will support you in helping accomplish your goals as secularists. And now you'll fill out the feedback sheets, and also we can have about 5 minutes for a broader discussion before the official end of the program. So thoughts, questions are welcome. Yes, Agnes.
So this seems like really comprehensive and lots of options, lots of ways to go about it, but it seems also a little overwhelming because there's so many like life areas, so many different projects, so many things, and then all of us still have to like, you know, take care of our daily lives, and then so many different tips. So like how would you suggest maybe balancing it to, because like it kind of, it makes me like want to procrastinate. I'm like, I don't know how to do all this stuff. It's a lot. It's a lot to do. So how do you have like some tips to like where to start? There's like a lot of exciting kind of options.
Sure. So Agnes asked where and how to start, and thank you for asking that. I would suggest starting with this workshop, and you've all come here, so you started with a 12. So then I would suggest dedicating some time each week, however much you think suits your needs, to actually figuring out your goals and setting your goals and deciding which of these are most important for you. So you can focus, you've already worked out through, hopefully, your ultimate goal and your various life areas, and figuring out perhaps focusing on one life area might be beneficial for you in your circumstances, or just in general writing out your goals for each of these life areas. But the main thing is to spend some time each week working on setting your goals, figuring out your goals and setting your goals, and then strategies to achieve your goals. Some of these are going to be very low-hanging fruit that you can implement immediately. Some of these are going to be more long-term things. They'll take more work. And I think it's very important for you to associate positive emotions as opposed to negative ones with sitting down and achieving your goals. Sitting down, figuring out those goals, figuring out how you set your goals, figuring out how to achieve your goals. Because that is probably one of the most impactful things you can actually be doing for having a life that actually contributes to your ideal life, that actually leads to your ideal life, actually setting out your goals and figuring out ways of achieving them. Thank you for asking. Other questions or thoughts are also welcome. All right.